Hello and welcome to Distributed Systems and Blockchain in the News. My name is Thomas Bocek, and this week I'm following up on the banking crisis. So last week I mentioned that the Silicon Bank Valley is in trouble, and on that weekend it was announced that all depositors were safe. This was announced by FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, and they said that depositors will have full access to their money beginning this morning when Silicon Valley Bridge Bank, the Bridge Bank, opens and resumes normal banking hours and activities, including online banking. So it's the following sentence here, meaning that all the depositors can have their money back. That also means that Circle and Coinbase, the one who issues USDC, can get their money and can then start to maintain their peg. Meanwhile, other banks are struggling. There is Silver Capital. I mentioned that last week. Now we have the Signature Bank from New York. This is also from FDIC. And here also they mentioned that they transferred all the deposits to protect all the depositors here. So it looks like that the depositors won't lose any money, but still the banks are under pressure. And here in Switzerland, the rumors are currently that Credit Suisse is being acquired. So here we have to use the archive link. And the Credit Suisse is also a bit under pressure, and currently the banking crisis doesn't help either. The Credit Suisse share value has dropped significantly, and there are rumors that UBS is trying to acquire Credit Suisse. There are also other banks actually mentioning or denying it. So it's currently unknown who will do what. But the Credit Suisse, they got backing from the Swiss National Bank that they can borrow money. So that should relieve a bit the pressure that the funds are actually safe on those banks, since it's backed by the Swiss National Bank. The next article shows also kind of an interesting landscape of quotes. It's an article from Reuters, several quotes from bankers. Some of them are quite optimistic, saying, yeah, that it's only for those fancy banks. Others have a more realistic opinion. So kind of interesting to read through those quotes what the current opinion is. However, it doesn't look that bad as in 2008. The banking crisis in 2008 was much worse, and also here the FDIC, this governmental agency, has a really nice graph showing the failed banks per year. So we are already at 2, should be actually at 3. We have Silvergate, we have Silicon Valley Bank, and we have Signature Bank. And here you see the total assets is also quite high. If we go to the last years, there were zeros. 2021 0, 2020 there have been some, but the assets were quite low. 2019 also quite low. In 2018 there were no banks that failed. However, in 2008, where the banking crisis started, it looked like this. So here we had lots of banks. Here you see them, which banks failed, and this was a huge banking crisis. and in 2023 we are here at 3, and let's see how it evolves. Meanwhile, in the crypto world, the USD peg is again reached. So if we go to coin market cap, we see that the US dollar and the USDC are on pair. Here we see USDC coin is at $1, and if we go to the last month, if the data loads, then we see here this drop. This was over the weekend where Circle and Coinbase couldn't get to their money, couldn't get to the Silicon Valley Bank, cannot withdraw, and since FTX took over, said that all depositors can have access to their money. I guess that Circle and Coinbase got to their funds and could maintain here the peg. So the peg is again at $1 here. And also interestingly, Bitcoin is gaining momentum. So we see here the graph. It's going upwards. So the last 7 days, we have seen from 20K to 27K. And the reason could be that the current banking crisis potentially makes Bitcoin a bit more attractive. That's what this guy is speculating. So he's from Trezor, he does hardware wallets for Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, and he said that this banking crisis could make Bitcoin much stronger because you don't trust the bank, but you trust Bitcoin. So the banking customers pull out their money and buy Bitcoins for that. I don't know if this is happening, but the exchange rate US dollar Bitcoin suggests that more people are buying Bitcoin these days. So let's jump into another topic. And the topic is about Docker. There was a big headline a couple of days ago. There was the following blog, which said that Docker is deleting open source images and what you need to know. So the question is, what is going on? And what's going on is that Docker sent an email to organizations who had images on their platform on Docker Hub, telling them that their account will be deleted, including the images. They have something like 30 days, and unless they do upgrade to a paid plan. So no free plans anymore. This is especially hard for small open source teams who put their images to Docker Hub. They probably cannot afford it or don't want to afford it. What Docker did is they apologized on how they communicated. They're still shutting the service down, but the communication was not optimal, so they recognized that. And what's also possible for those small open source projects is that they can apply for the Docker open source program. So if you have or if you need images hosted from Docker Hub, you're an open source program, open source software, you could apply for that. So what this article mentions actually is what's the current state, what should be done next. And one alternative they mention quite often in many articles is the possibility to switch to GitHub repositories, because the GitHub repository, it's featured on this side here. They also mention the prices, and what they mention also is that for public repositories, here we have the pricing somewhere down. GitHub package is free for public repositories. So there, if you're an open source project, you have images, you want to serve images, then you could use GitHub repositories to serve those images. That means that current scripts that pull from Docker Hub would need to be changed, but there is an alternative. And in order to avoid the next Docker Hub moment closing down, this guy here suggests to use your own domain, but not for self-hosting, because self-hosting is a bit painful, but for redirecting. So the idea is to redirect your domain to currently free providers, so that you could move from Docker Hub, for example, to GitHub repository services more easily without breaking your scripts that you have maybe at the customer side where they're pulling images. So this is a way on how such thing could be avoided. One quote that summarizes for small open source community the situation quite well is, if you're not a paying Docker Hub customer, it's time to leave Docker Hub. So the next issue is about the cloud. And one reason to go to the cloud is that you can have a service at global scale if it's a SaaS solution, and you don't have to worry about technical glitches. And this is also what, for example, Fly.io is advertising on their website. Fly.io, it's the following site here: deploy app servers close to the user, run your full stack apps and databases all over the world, no ops required. However, Fly.io is not that reliable in the recent past, and the last incident was with a Consul component. They have a nice status report here where they summarized what's going on. And Consul, this is a distributed service discovery and configuration tool from HashiCorp, and Consul is designed to help organizations build and manage distributed, scalable and fault-tolerant systems. And it provides several key features, for example, service discovery, health check, key value storage, and can support multiple data centers. This is quite a solid, good product to use from my previous experiences. But what's a bit worrying here is the following sentence, or the following statement: we are working to build a new Consul cluster with 10 times the RAM. We aren't sure, but believe a routine DNS change might have created a thundering herd problem, causing Consul servers to immediately increase RAM usage by 500%. This is not ideal, and from an operations and engineering perspective, this statement needs now the highest attention to figure out what was the issue, because if you don't know what the issue was, it might happen again. And the last news for today is about Instagram, and it's about disabling NFTs in Instagram. It's the following article here from NFT Now. Instagram is disabling its NFT features. Since I'm too old to understand Instagram, I did not even know there is an NFT feature in Instagram, and it seems that Meta's metaverse NFT crypto ventures are not performing that well. Oh, and by the way, this Bored Ape as an NFT can be bought. The last sale was over 1,000 ETH, but here you never know with OpenSea I will talk about this also in the lecture in the fall semester. You can do wash tradings, so you never know if it's a real buyer or not. And same with here. So these NFTs, they can have a high price, but you actually don't know if this is a real sell or if it's the same guy, just with a different address. But there are currently outstanding offers. For example, for this Bored Ape here, there is currently an offer for almost 60 ETH, and it's roughly worth 108,000 US dollars. As I mentioned, you never know if this is a real trade, if it's a real offer, or just from the same author with a different address, just to put up the price to show a high price here.